I'm so honored to introduce one of the most esteemed journalists talking about women's empowerment, talking about career, talking about finance. And that is our amazing moderator today, Lauren Young. Lauren is a lifelong journalist, been at Reuters, I think, over a decade. And you've seen her writing for Bless Smart Money, you name the place, and she is there. In fact, what we can all do, just so it's really fun, Google Lauren Young, and you will see that she has written for so many organizations. And her work covers a lot of verticals. It covers the world at work, which is so powerful, what we're talking about today. It also covers the change suite, talking about the great reboot that we're all going through. Also, investing, personal finance, life lessons, and how they all wrap together, which is what we're going to be talking also about tonight. And I know that she won't say this, but I'm going to go ahead and say this for her because we don't pat ourselves on the back. She received one of the Journalist of the Year awards at Reuters. So again, we are just so honored for her to bring her fantastic insight to moderate this very important panel along with the fantastic panelists that we have here tonight. And I'm going to kick it right back to you, Judy, so that you can go ahead and kick us off to that next step. And I know we have our panelists that we want to introduce as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stacy, and thanks for joining this evening and introducing Lauren, who is fantastic. Just thrilled that she's here, zooming in from the Reuters offices, but long-time Brooklynite and Philadelphia native. So just pleasure to have you here, Lauren. Really, thank you so much.
I wondered, did my mother pay you to say all these things? That's what I want to know.
No need.
No need. And I have to say, we as women, and I know we're going to talk about this. This is probably going to be one of the things we talk about. We need to kind of put ourselves forward, like as that personal brand of, kind of pushing ourselves in our career. And I feel like we don't do that enough. And so, Lauren, I am doing that for you right now. And, what we all want to do is just everyone make that commitment to pay that forward to some other fabulous women who needs to hear it. But yeah, Lauren, you rock it. And I've just been so an admirer of your work for decades. So.
Well, thank you so much. And there's people walking around the office right now that the maintenance staff is cleaning up, but I am coming to you live from Times Square. Judy, do you want me to introduce the panelists or were you going to do that? And I apologize, guys, my email is on and I want to turn it off while I'm talking to you. So I'm going to mute it in a second.
No, I'm ready to go. So I have an introduction. I will start with Lauren Ziadie from Morgan Stanley. I'm thrilled to introduce her as one of our panelists tonight. Lauren joined Morgan Stanley in 2010 as a recruiting coordinator for the private bank. And today, what is that, 12 years later, is the executive director of diversity and inclusion and leading the women's segment for Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. She is driving change there and identifying their long-term business strategies and priorities. Really a new and an important role for Lauren and for Morgan Stanley. We're thrilled to have her here tonight. Lauren is a creator and a doer and has led many new initiatives supporting women in leadership. And I'm just so excited that she's here to join us tonight and share her savvy success journey with all of us tonight. Limor Seltzer is here from Nationwide. She joined Nationwide. Actually, I want to share a little bit before she joined Nationwide is Lauren is a lifelong educator. And what is wonderful about her is she loves learning and she loves training and coaching and developing people. She's actually a former New York City school teacher. And today she is the Associate VP of Sales and Development at Nationwide Financial. She juggles many responsibilities like we all do ourselves. And I'm just so thrilled to have Limor join the panel tonight to share her path and her pivotal moments that drove her to succeed. Welcome, Limor, to the panel. Next panelist is Fiona Philip. I am just delighted Fiona agreed to share with us her time and her expertise to join us here tonight. She is a principal and associate general counsel of the Office of General Counsel of KPMG. And also she is a Savvy Ladies board member. We are just honored and thrilled she is joining us this evening. Fiona is a real problem solver. She is a regulatory lawyer with a unique combination of working in law firms and with government experience. She uncovers and commits to government covering securities enforcement, litigation, leading the defense of global businesses in government investigations, leading internal investigations, providing compliance counseling to help prevent the need even for an investigation. Fiona has served as an enforcement and ethics counsel to 2 SEC chairmen and senior counsel, SEC Division of Enforcement. It is just so fun to have Fiona joining us today. She's zooming in to share her insights, her tips, and her story from the DC area. So welcome, Fiona, to the panel. And Mary Elizabeth Taylor is joining us this evening, also from the DC area. She is the new VP of External Communications, External Affairs and Community for Robinhood. Mary Elizabeth is a dynamic leader with a broad network that spans technology, finance, and government. She's recently joined Robinhood to bring her tremendous value of public service and international relations to financial technology. We all know the importance of technology today. She knows it firsthand. She spent over a decade navigating the senior levels of the US federal government, where in 2018, she was confirmed by the US Senate to be the 32nd Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs, both a fellow at Harvard University and a visiting expert at at Stanford University. It is a real pleasure and delight to welcome Mary Elizabeth to the Get Savvy Success panel tonight. So with no further ado, I'm going to stop sharing our screen. And Lauren, I turn it over to you to start the great conversation.
Thank you so much, Judy. And thank you. This panel, it really is a dream panel. I love the diversity of age, of experience, of fields. So I'm going to start off with the question, and I think I'm going to ask you, Mary Elizabeth, only because you were last in being introduced. What was that pivotal moment for you in your career as a leader that made you realize that you could succeed or did succeed or will succeed?
You know, it's funny. I think I've thought about this question a little bit, and I've realized that it's like an ever growing list of these moments, right? Like, I think it's hard. And I'm sure that so many women on this panel feel the same way too. Like, there are so many different moments, I think, in my career that really stand out and in a way that's super influential. But I think what the through line is between all of them has been, frankly, like my mentors. The people that I surround myself with have always been integral to any pivotal moment of my career. So I'm very deliberate and intentional about who I surround myself with. And I think as I've grown in my career, I've been able to realize, like, when there are moments that are particularly challenging or confusing or new or present different issues that I haven't felt before, now that I'm farther along in my career, I'm more aware of, like, who in my network can help me in that specific moment. And so I'm really deliberate about trying to make sure that I surround myself with all different kinds of people who have all had different kinds of experiences. So that way, when I'm going through a pivotal moment or something that's particularly challenging, I can reach out to someone who might have had something similar to that. So, yeah.
Lauren Z, just so you know, we joked about it. We would sit next to each other in homeroom if we were in school together. Lauren Z, what was the aha moment for you? Is there anything that comes to mind? Oh, and you're on mute, of course.
I have to agree with Mary Elizabeth in that, you know, there are moments in your career, whether it's a successful project, an initiative you launched, maybe a time when you were promoted where you realized, okay, I got this. This feels good. But there was a specific time, I think, for me, thinking about this question, well, let me say, I don't have the traditional finance background that many of my peers do. And so when I first started in the industry, I put a pressure on myself, I think, to fit a certain mold that I thought was successful or acceptable in terms of sort of climbing the ranks. And there was a moment where I was asked to speak at one of our multicultural leadership summits in front of, a couple hundred of our colleagues. And I was asked to essentially share my story. And it was all around fitting out, right? Accepting the fact that it's not necessarily about fitting in, right? Owning your differences. And I knew in that moment that I had to be vulnerable, but it was the first time that I had shared my story. And it was so incredibly well received. I think that was a pivotal moment in my career where I realized that's my superpower, right? Owning your difference or your uniqueness is really your asset. And how that resonated with others made me realize, all right, it's time for you to own your story, own who you are. And that's a point, I think, was certainly a proud moment, but that moment that I think really clicked that, all right, you definitely do have this.
I love the idea of superpower. So I'm going to stay on that theme. Fiona, what do you think your superpower is as a leader, aside from being super cool?
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I have been told that I am super relatable, that I ask the right questions. I don't, when others ask questions of me, I don't, belittle them or say like, that's a stupid question or dumb question. So I sort of try to step into their shoes and think about their perspective and where they're coming from, and making sure, as a lawyer and just like people in finance and in legislative affairs and, in the insurance industry, we all have our own language and our own lingo, right? And so as a lawyer, you can get trapped in legalese, but that doesn't really help like every client that you have. And so I learned early on that I wanted to be able to talk to other lawyers, judges, law enforcement, but I also want to be able to talk to CEOs or, a teacher about what I do or how I could help them. And so really learning to be relatable to all spectrums of folks in all different walks of life, I would say is my superpower, because some others have told me that it is.
I like that superpower. And as a woman who's married 2 lawyers, I can say that's a real skill that you have there. I'll just leave it at that. Limor, I want you to talk a little bit about being ready for that next leadership opportunity. You had a career shift, and how did you get there, and what made you think it was time to make that leap?
It's funny because you figure out what you want to do in life, right? You figure out what you're passionate about and what you believe in. And I always knew that I loved helping people. So the natural path was education. And I just couldn't make any money. I was making no money. I was a high school teacher in New York City, and it was my debt and my loans, and talk about financial savviness. I had zero of, and Lauren, I share with you too, new to the financial industry. But I think it's really a combination of figuring out what you really love to do, and it's helping others, and learning the hard way that there isn't one path that's set out for you, because that's the path that I was told is the path for me, especially as a woman, right? And from the background that I come from, if you were going to work, that would be the path that you would take. It's the more feminine path to take. And learning throughout my career that I can actually show up as who I am and what I love in different areas. And the pivotal moment of that was coming to Nationwide. And again, with zero financial acumen, coming into the world of finance and being petrified, sitting in those meetings and hearing people talk, the financial talk, and saying, oh my God, I am scared. I don't even know what was just said. And having such a great leader with Christy Rodriguez, who just allowed me to be me and encouraged me to bring my ideas to the table and talk about and bring to the front what I love, which is developing others. And what a better way to do that in the role that I am in today, which is sales development and training. And realizing for the first time in my career that there isn't a set path, that you can really do anything. Just figure out what you're passionate about and you can do it anywhere. And the perfect proof of that is being part of Nationwide Financial. And I'm being in a financial industry and now learning about finance and learning about savvy ladies from my leader at Nationwide and realizing that I can do both, right? I can help women and I can help others and still learn about finance and be more savvy myself. So for me, savvy ladies is really both, right? It's learning and getting that financial acumen. That is so critical. I mean, when you think about this, Lauren, financial illiteracy is the #1 economic crisis in the world. And if you think about it, it's affecting over 5 billion lives. And what percentage of that is women? When you think about that, I literally knew
and women, we
nothing.
know that women are the decision makers. I mean, we're the
Right.
ones who make the key financial decisions. So it's actually skewed probably even more than what you think it would be.
So it's perfect. Who would think that you could combine those two, and you can. So that's the point here, is that when you find out what you're passionate about, you could do anything.
Mary Elizabeth, you made the leap from the public sector to the private sector. Could you talk a little bit about that? That's a big decision, and the world is so different. I know, I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. Can you talk a little bit about that pivotal moment for you and making that decision and knowing that you were ready to go into a corporate job after working for so long in the public world?
Yeah, for sure. So I started working in the US Senate when I was 16. So I the Senate is my bones, is what I like to say. Like I grew up in the Senate, I worked in the White House, and I worked in the State Department. And so the thing about it though, is that they're all very different buildings and different institutions, and they run very differently. And so, working at my office in the Senate was maybe 7-8 people. And at the State Department, I was leading a 60-person team in an 80,000 person global organization. So completely different situations. And I mean, for me, when I was deciding whether to go into the private sector or stay in government, let me take a step back. I'm the kind of person who is always trying to expand themselves. I want to keep learning new things. I want to, I view my career as opposed to narrowing a pyramid with every step that I take. I view it as widening every single step. I want to learn more and more. And so for me, being in the Senate and then the White House and the State Department, I was okay, it's where in the government do I want to go that's going to continue to expand me? And for me, moving into the private sector just really allowed me to continue to expand and learn new skills. That said, though, it's not I was I am totally ready for this, right? I feel whenever anyone makes a big jump in their career, there's always this little bit hanging in the back, am I ready for this thing? But you know what? I think what I've realized is it's we can do anything. We can literally do anything. We can figure it out and get things done. And so even though I didn't walk into it thinking, I've got this no matter what, I walked into it thinking, I can figure this out. I can totally figure this out. I can get this done.
I love that because you hear a lot about imposter syndrome in this, where you're all nodding your head, which is the idea that, we don't think that we're good enough to do what we do. And apparently, men don't, they just do it. Yeah. And I don't know if I 100% agree with that, because I definitely wing this panel right now. In some ways, I'm just winging it. No, I'm not. But my high school friends are all texting because Barry Manilow is coming in concert and they're freaking out about it. Stop texting right now. But that said, it actually segues really well into the fact that we're in this weird hybrid work environment. I happen to be in the office today. I've only started coming back to the office a short amount, 1 or 2 days a week, and I've only been doing it for the past month. How do you showcase your leadership skills in this hybrid world? I'm going to ask you first, Fiona, if you don't mind answering that.
No worries. It's funny that you would ask that question because I was actually talking to one of my deputies about it today. And the conversation was not necessarily on highlighting my skills or showcasing my talent or others doing it. It was about, I would say, the difficulty of making like real connections, not over Zoom, but the lunches, the coffees that we used to have, and whether this sort of hybrid model would shift, because I think we're all lacking that sort of making the connections the way that we used to. I don't think that Zoom or any other virtual device is actually going to make up for that interpersonal connections that we make through meetings and lunches and coffees, etc. So one of the ways that I've been trying through the last 3 years at this point to not necessarily showcase my skills, but to make sure that I stay attuned to the business that I am part of, is to schedule regular like check-ins with the business people, right? Because with an organization like KPMG, we have 3 primary lines of business. These are the people that bring in the revenue: audit, tax, and advisory. And then you have what's called like the business protection group or the business resource groups, which are the general counsel's office, legislative affairs or government affairs, communications, and the like, which try to protect the business and make sure that, the business can do what it needs to do in order for the firm to be profitable. And so we, in the Office of General Counsel, we get brought in when there's something bad happening, or
I was just going to say the general counsel only comes in when it's not good. So I know that.
But see, that's the perception that people have.
Legal's
right? Legal comes in. You don't want to talk to the lawyers. You don't want a phone call from the lawyers. And so in order to build relationships with the business so that they can feel comfortable calling you before the firestorm, right? To help you think through issues. If we're launching a new product, thinking about how we're going to talk to our regulators or talk to the press, you want legal to come in earlier rather than later trying to clean things up. And so part of what I've been doing over the last 3 years, because we're all virtual, is scheduling regular calls, regular Microsoft Teams meetings with the business people, so that they get to know me. They can call me and say, "Oh, we're thinking about doing this," and they know that they have a friendly voice, an advisor on the other side of the phone that will help them through the issues, help them think through some of the issues before it gets to be a problem because they didn't bring in legal earlier. And
so in some ways, being in this hybrid environment may just be a little disarming. I mean, in a good way, because I don't know, there's something about sitting in a room with a bunch of people in suits versus the cubes on TV. I don't know, Lauren, do you find that that's different for you? Just the interpersonal communication and leading people, is it different in this environment?
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic was rough for everyone. And I think, having said that, there are some silver linings. And oddly enough, I do think Zoom is one of them. I think it was probably very challenging and bizarre to get accustomed to this type of interaction. I definitely agree with Fiona in that no amount of technology could ever replace that human connection. I find myself actually checking in with people a lot more now because, we can have this Zoom conversation, but after you hang up, you sort of feel like you're on an island, right? So checking in with your team members, your colleagues, whoever it might be, just to say, everything okay? Just want to check in, right? I think the other challenge is for those who may be or have been at an organization for some time and may have a strong network, it may have been a little easier to transition into this virtual world versus somebody who had to onboard or start at a company. And this is their first experience, right? So how do you build those connections? How do you get a true sense of the company culture over Zoom? That's hard. But I agree with Fiona. It's being very intentional about reaching out, scheduling these conversations. That's sort of the world we're shifting towards.
And I'm also mindful that everybody that's participating here may not be in the corporate sector per se. So I do want to make sure that we offer actionable advice to people who may not have the desk job or no, nothing's 9 to 5. But I
will
do
say, Lauren,
Go
can I
ahead.
just get
Yeah.
on that point, building connections, regardless of what field you're in, is important. I remember when I was in college, actually, I can take it back to high school. When I was in high school and college, like getting to know my teachers and my professors, those relationships were critical because so my teachers learned and my professors learned what I was interested in. And if I said something, or they knew of, let's say, it was scholarship for college, right? So scholarship money, or it was a summer program when I was in high school. Because they would get that information, and because I had a relationship with them and I would talk to them about my goals, my dreams, my aspirations, or just what was happening, then I became top of mind for those people. And so you found suddenly the opportunities that you weren't aware of, the doors were open because those people that you built relationships with, they suddenly thought about you more because they were like, oh, like Fiona wants to do more public speaking. Here's a great opportunity for like some, speech camp or something like that. And so it doesn't matter, I think, what field you're in or what level you're at in your field, building relationships is always going to be key.
That's an amazing. Go ahead, Limor. Go ahead.
This really just triggered something for me, early on in my career. And I always thought I just had to work really hard. And it was back in the day, it was my first corporate job in-house. I was in sales in the field, and I came in, and it was all about you come in before the sun comes up, you go home after the sun goes down. It was all about that visibility and work hard. And I always believed that my hard work and dedication would speak for itself. And I was wrong. I didn't get it right. It was my upbringing. I learned the hard way that it was actually the guys who were going out and hanging out afterwards. Because when I went home, I had to go take care of babies, right? I had no life. But my counterparts were able to go out and hang out at the bar, which is not my thing. I just don't do bars. It's just not me, And I didn't realize that that's where the connections were happening. It wasn't just about the work. And I learned this the hard way because I kept getting passed up for opportunities because I wasn't creating that network. I thought that my work would speak for itself, and it didn't. Nobody was advocating for me. I wasn't part of the buddies. They had a network and they were promoting each other and helping each other rise. And I learned that the hard way. And it's only in my older years now that I realized, oh my God, how can I bring other women with me? How do we bring each other along? And how do we help each other? And how do we create networks in meaningful environments that are meaningful to us? What are those opportunities, right? And helping each other, especially because I'm a mother too, and I'm a main breadwinner. But guess what? When I go home, there's still that expectation that I'm still taking care of the household and the kids and the laundries. And it's so crazy to me that we do this to ourselves. And how can we help each other? So I apologize that I brought up something so meaningful to me. It just triggered in my thoughts. Like I was doing it all wrong. And that's the advice I'll give to everyone here, even if you're not in the corporate environment, right?
I love that. And I love the passion that you're bringing to it too.
Your neighbors, your other women in your community, reach out, network, help each other. That's how you do it.
I think the other thing that I would just add in really quickly here is it reminds me of a piece of advice that one of my dearest mentors gave me, which is like, networking is working. Like, I feel like it's very easy to think that it's separate from work, but it is absolutely not. And I mean, you know, she also said to piggyback off of what you were saying as well, is like, you know, women do tend to put it to the side and like just focus on, like, I can speak for myself and say, like, for the longest time, I was just like focusing on like getting this project done or this task done in the best way possible, and having that be like the only thing that I'm thinking about. And that means that I'm doing well at work. But like, networking is working, and not networking in a way that's like transactional of like, what can you give me and I give you, but like getting to know a whole entire human being for like who they are, what do they like to do, what do they do outside of work, and like connecting in a way that's deeper, deeper and wider.
You networked to get this job. I mean, I imagine that it didn't just get, you know, handed to you on a silver platter. How, just, can you talk a little bit about how you got to
Yeah.
Robinhood? Because
Yeah.
again, you made this career switch.
For sure. So like, you know, I've been blessed and worked really hard to like earn a great network here in DC. And I feel very blessed for the people that I'm connected with. And, you know, I do a lot to nourish those relationships every day. And honestly, yeah, Robinhood came out of that. But what I can say though is like, at the end of the day, I don't think that I would make a career decision if I hadn't talked to someone that I trust about where it is that I'm going. So even if I were to happen upon like a job opening that is like not through my network, I would still kick the tires with all of the people in my network who are relevant to it. So it would, and I think the world at the end of the day, I think in some industries is pretty small, where you're like 1 degree away from somebody who is either working in that company, as a consultant for that company, has some sort of connection to wherever it is that you're headed. So, I mean, regardless of like the path, any place that I would go, I would always put my network first, because the most important thing to me is the people that I'm working with, and that's what
100%. I just celebrated, but I showed you guys that I got a 10-year. Somebody in the intro said a decade, but I've actually been here I celebrated my 12-year anniversary last week at Reuters, and my boss, who at the time literally sits right there, you can't see, but now he's got a different role. And when I was coming on board and I was interviewing for the job, I actually interviewed him, and I said, if you're crazy, I'm not interested in working for you. And his face just fell. Who was this woman asking him these questions? But it's so important that the people you work with are good people, and they can be, you know, we all have our little quirks, but just at the end of the day, good people, that's to me very, very important. Because for me, like, we spend so much time together. Work is family for me. These are people I care about. I want to talk a little bit about influencing people, because as women and as leaders, what we do also cascades down to the other people around us. Who wants to talk a little bit about the ways that they influence their colleagues? Lauren, I'll put you on the spot only because you work in the role that's really prime for that.
No, of course, happy to start. I think the biggest thing is leading by example. You know, the perfect example I could use within sort of my own experiences, the conversation around mental health and self-care and taking time for yourself has never been more prevalent with, you know, since the last 2-3 years. And it's one thing to hear it from your leadership team. It's one thing to hear it from your direct manager around, you know, make sure you take that time, or make sure you schedule some time off. But unless you're seeing it, you're not quite sure if that's an option for you, right? Is that lip service? Are they saying I should do that, but I can't? And so seeing that and leading by example, I think, is one way to help others not only lead authentically, but to help them take care of themselves and rise through the ranks, right? Ultimately, it's creating a space where, you know, they say you have to see it to be it. And I think if you're able to see someone who is operating in a way that you admire, that you aspire to, that's the greatest gift.
Yeah.
Who on this panel has kids aside from Limor? Anybody else? Okay. So one of the things that as a working parent is just, you know, in the old days, we'd never like bring our personal life into our
So true.
workplace, but especially in the we're not in the post-COVID world, but in this world, in this environment, there's just so much going on with family and elder care and kids. And I mean, I just got an email from my colleague today that his kid has COVID, so he's not going to be coming into the office tomorrow. I'm wondering how you juggle that and how much you share with your teams as stuff that's going on with you in your life. I see you nodding your head, Limor, so I'm gonna go
Yeah.
to
Oh
you.
my God. I'm like, this is such an important topic, and it really is hard. It is not easy because so much is on us and so much is expected of us. And we're still living in these old norms and old roles, right? And we're trying to break free of it. And we're trying to redefine who we are in the workforce, at home, as parents, as sharing with partners. It really brings this short story I'll share with you. It really triggers all of this for me, is that whole concept of work-life balance. And I tried so hard to have work-life balance, but it was so hard because, especially when I was out of the field back in corporate opportunities to advance, I had to work hard. It was what it was expected. And that's how you got seen, right? I thought. And I remember this, and this really triggered it for me, because there was no such thing as work-life balance. There was no such thing. It was work, 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 work. And I remember we were leading some training, and it was a Friday night, and it was late, and I was straightening up and coming back into the office and doing it. And my leader at the time was leaving and saying, "Oh, you're still here." I was like, "Yeah, I'm just cleaning up, finishing up," and got home really late. And that leader held it against me on a performance review. And he said that I had no work-life balance, but yet nobody else stayed to help. My counterparts went home. But I felt so responsible as a woman and as a mother that everything had to be done. And part of that was me, right? And I realized something in that moment that was so pivotal and really changed it for me, is there's no such thing as work-life balance. And the minute we could figure that out and agree to it, that let's put it out there, there's no way that work and life can be in complete balance. And guess what? Life takes its toll on us. This is the trick that I learned. In this imperfect imbalance, how do you do it? I got 4 children. I got a full life at home and at work. And I have a full team that I care about and I treat as my family, right? So how do you do it? This is the trick. It's managing the imbalances and learning that there are times when work is going to be up, and there are times when life is going to take over, and life interrupts often. I have a lot of stories to share. I know you all know this. Life interrupts. So guess what? Manage that imbalance. And if you're too long in one area of it, then tip it the other way, meaningfully, because you can't be in one zone all the time, because nothing will work. So it's really learning how to manage those imbalances, and that's the trick.
Well, that
I
was
love
so
that.
beautiful.
I know, I love that. I had never thought about it like that, but I love that.
And I tell my team that, by the way. So I have a strong leadership team, and we're all mothers. And I tell them all the time, you be you, you do you. And it's okay. We stumble sometimes. The trick on the team is to be a team. And how do we help support each other? So when somebody's struggling, how do we band together and make up for that work? And guess what? The next time when I need to be out and something is happening in my life, my team is going to support me. So that's the second part of the trick.
Mhm.
Manage the imbalance and create a network of women, if it's on your team, if it's in your community, that can help support. Because I grew up in Israel. I grew up in a community that was about doors were always open, and you didn't have to make an appointment to have a play date, right? It's mind-boggling for me. And it was a community, and we took care of each other. We've gotten so far away from that. What happened? As women, I think we could bring that back, create a sense of community and help each other out. and help each other through the difficult times. It doesn't matter where you are, if you're in a corporate environment, if you're at home, whatever it is you're doing with your life.
I love that.
That's how
Thank
we
you.
win.
Thank you for being honest. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I that is such a key leadership quality as well, Limor. And you mentioned, creating that safe space and being a support for others, and others will do for you. And I think part of owning those imbalances is just that, owning it, and it's going to be okay. And not every day is going to be perfect. I think we're all, to a certain extent, perfectionists and want everything to be perfect in all aspects of our life. And I don't think we often enough give ourselves grace or congratulate ourselves on our wins, or reflect on the day on what went well versus what didn't. So I just wanted to give a nod to you, because I think that is such an incredible and important leadership quality.
Thank you. We do have a question in the chat, and I will encourage people, if you want to ask questions. I'm monitoring, and if it works with the flow, that's great. But this is specifically for you, Mary Elizabeth, and I thought it was really interesting, Raina. Thank you for submitting it. Mary Elizabeth, you mentioned that you work every day to nurture your network, and she wants to hear some examples of what you do specifically and how it's helpful.
Yeah.
And I mean, she said other participants would be interested in hearing this, but also for the other panelists too, if you at the end have other things to share, that would be great. Go ahead, Mary Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think it takes me back to actually that same mentor who told me that networking is working. And a piece of like actionable advice that she gave me was, for every like conversation that you have in your network, 75% of those conversations should just be like catching up, getting to know someone, like not asking for anything. And then at some point, if they're in a position to like help you with something, then that's like other 25%. So I think that's like a key piece of advice that like rings true to me from an actionable standpoint with networking, is it's like, you're investing in like getting to know this person, whether it's like coffee or grabbing a drink or doing a quick phone call while I'm walking my dog, or something just like easy that's authentic to you, right? Because you want to show up as yourself. So like whatever fits for you and how you spend your time with like other relationships that you have, I think finding a way that works for you and doing it in a way that is like meaningful and genuine and like not like fully transactional. But I would love to hear what the other panelists like think as well.
I am a big
Go ahead,
believer.
Fiona.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in just checking in on your network. Because hopefully your network also become your friends, right? So it's just not transactional. These are people that you actually want to hang out with and not mind having a meal with every now and again. And so sometimes I do actually have to like turn it on intentionally and say, oh my God, I've been sitting in my office at home and I haven't reached out to anyone outside of my organization in like 3 months. And so you actually do have to sometimes be very conscious that I haven't done the networking that I need to do, and don't wait until, for me, it's like, knock on wood, God forbid, I'm leaving KPMG and then it's like, oh, I need to find a new job, or I want to find a new job, or whatever it is. I don't want to have to tap my network then. And I haven't spoken to them in a year or 2 years or something like that. So.
And do you reach out to people by email? Do you tend to call them? Do you text? I'm just curious what your mode of communication is.
I do a little bit of both. I do a little bit of all the above. And so I'm going to be in New York next week. And so I've reached out to a couple of people who live in New York and work in New York and said, I'm going to be in town. Let's meet for coffee or lunch or whatever we can do. I've done that both with people in my organization, right? Because we haven't all been, I think, in one place in eons. And I've reached out to people who I used to work with in New York and said, hey, I'm going to be in the city. Will you be around? And then for those who are Now, personal friends, I will text them periodically and just say, how you doing? We haven't spoken in ages. Like, what's going on with you? So it's a combination.
Great. And I will say, for networking with people that you don't know, but that you would like to know, I think that LinkedIn Premium is absolutely worth its price. It's not that much money, but it's worth paying for it because you get access to, like, for example, you can look at your school alumni database, or you can look at companies to see at a company, someone you may have gone to the same school or grown up in the same area. It just gives you a lot more detail. So it's just,
And
I don't work for LinkedIn. I just like it a lot.
I also wouldn't be shy of asking other people to make an introduction for you. I think that's one way where I've gotten to expand my network. And I had a call yesterday with a junior lawyer I used to work with at a law firm who is thinking about leaving her current gig and she wants to go specifically into sports and entertainment. And I
Oh,
said,
great.
okay, well, that's where we focus. And so it was literally going down my Rolodex and figuring out Rolodex. We don't use those anymore, but going down in my address book and figuring out who I knew in that area and people that she knew because she just wasn't thinking about it, and saying to her, I'll do an introduction to these two people. And that was really like all she needed. She just needed a start for people who were in that industry, and then it goes from there.
So that's really giving of your time, Fiona. And I think as a leader, I think that's what separates rock stars from the roadies, if you want to say that. People who really want to give themselves and give their time, but it also that it's your time too. So I'm curious, maybe Limor, how do you make the decision when to help somebody or to pass, or do you just always help?
So, it's hard, right? Because there's a limited amount of time and you want to help everyone. It's just who I am. And just combining really the question you just asked in the previous one, because I think another side of this is and I applaud my savvy panelists here, but I am not by nature a good networker. And it's not because I can't, I'm very social, but I'm very shy by nature. And my life has brought me to a place where I had zero confidence most of my life, and I was afraid and felt unworthy to network. So part of what
You do not present that way at all.
not anymore. Not anymore. I'm going to be 50 this year. So, it's about time, my friends. It's about time. But I'll tell you this, I struggled most of my life because I didn't feel worthy of anything and anyone. And I didn't feel worthy of the relationship. So when we tell women to go out and network, there are women out there who can't do that. They don't know how. They don't feel confident enough in themselves to do that. So I urge every woman that I can speak to, now that I understand the importance of networking. And to answer your second question, Lauren, what I'm doing is, how do I help women and see the ones that aren't networking and that are quiet and alone, and reaching out to them instead and bringing them in and saying, hey, let's talk. You see, that's what I needed. I needed someone to do that for me because I couldn't. It's easy to say go out and network, but it's hard to do, especially if you're shy. So I urge every woman on this call to just reach out to another woman as much as you can, and reach out to people that you see that are struggling, or maybe they're not as involved, and bring them in and include them, because that's how we can win, and that's how we can help each other even further.
Nikita, I hope I say your name right. It's kind of the same question she asked in the chat as a mom, but it's not just, I don't think the question is just as a mom, because as a woman, how do you balance life, work, and networking? Because I don't know about any of you, but I've got an 86-year-old father. So there's also caregiving, thrown into the equation, which is a whole other can of worms. And I have a dog at home too. I know you said, Mary Elizabeth, a very quiet dog, by the way. But literally,
I've been on mute this whole time.
Well, feel free to show your pet. But there's I'm responsible for other life forms besides my children too. So I'm curious if anybody could talk a little bit more. Just again, I know we talked that work-life balance is a myth, but how do you do have to prioritize things at different points in your life? And so how do you make those decisions?
I'm happy to jump in. I think so much of it is being intentional. And you said, you spoke to this, Fiona, in terms of, I'll give you an example for networking, because days are crazy and life is constantly being thrown at you. I have a day, and it's usually Fridays, where I block time where I know I'm going to be reaching out to my network. Right. And you could even get to a point where maybe it's a spreadsheet, or maybe you have a list of people that, you want to make sure you stay in touch with, even if it's as simple as sending an email or shooting a text. Hey, just checking in. I think the third thing is managing expectations. And I think that has been something that's been hard for me, really on the home front, just because I don't want to, that mom guilt is real. And you don't want to feel like you're dropping the ball. You don't want to feel like you're letting people down. But owning things that you are able to do, can I do pickup today and make this 5 o'clock meeting, right? But being very, managing those expectations and being really honest with yourselves in terms of what you can do in any given day at any given moment.
Hallelujah, Lauren. I'm going to add to that because you really touched me with what you said. And it really makes me think. We're working on the norms that have been prescribed for us as women. We're still there. We're still stuck there. This is what we got to start changing. We got to write a new recipe, because the new recipe, believe it or not, there's some good that came out of this pandemic. It allowed us to show up more as ourselves and be in the pajamas while we're on the call. So when you think about this, we have to start breaking down these old norms of what it means to be a corporate person or a person in a specific job, and say, hey, it's okay if my kid walks down in the middle of a call and jumps into the Zoom meeting. You know what? So what? How do we do that? How do we rewrite the norms in society and create opportunities? The only way we could do that is as we get into positions of power, is we start writing new rules that are more inclusive and let people show up just the way they are. And I'll share this story because this really also affected me. And we all have these stories in our life that shape us. And, I shared this story with the panelists earlier. You see my curly hair? This is, and it's tamed today. It's normally not this tame. It's usually out here. And especially when it's raining and humid. So I was always embarrassed by that, because there was this norm of how I needed to look in the world. And I was always straightening my hair. And I had a leader who at one point in my career who made me feel really bad about it. I just had a baby and I went out for field travel with them, and my hair was there, right? I had no time because I was up all night with a baby and was trying to get to the appointment to meet my manager. And he made a comment that just killed me inside. He made me feel like I didn't look good. And I carried that with me, and I always straightened my hair. And the first time in my life that I started wearing my hair curly was when I got this Nationwide job. And I told you I'm almost 50, and I just started June 2020. And I can show up because my leader, who's a strong woman, encouraged me to be me and feel comfortable with who I am. So I feel comfortable to show up how I am in a real way. So this is what we need to be doing to help each other out. It's not about the suit and the hair a certain way and how we need to look. And look at the social media out there. Look what we're doing to our young women. I feel horrible I have 4 kids. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. I feel horrible for my girls in this environment we're living today. It's horrible because it's prescribed what they need to look like and what they need to wear and how they need to show up. And they're so concerned about it instead of what's really important is figuring out who they are and where they can bring their power and their passion into the world. So these are the things that I'm really passionate about that we have to change.
Yes, and I also have curly hair, and I see Lisa, your hair, I can see it because you're on camera. Like I say, my hair has its own zip code sometimes when it's raining. So I totally can relate to that. I wanted to talk a little bit about building teams because I do think it's important to who we are. And Limor, you talked a little bit about, having that network to fall back on in the office. But maybe Mary Elizabeth, since you're new to a company, I think when you're new, it's a little bit harder in a way. And I'm curious what tricks you have or tips you have for creating a team of people that you don't really know, that you haven't been with professionally for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. So I think when I think about team building, for me, it's always rooted in authenticity and who I am and the skills that I bring to the table, right? Like I take a look at what is the world that we as a team need to accomplish and where does my skill set fit into that, right? And then thinking about what are these other buckets of things that maybe I'm not an expert in, I don't have like the depth in, or like the areas that I need to build out around myself, as opposed to trying to say like, I know everything about everything that we need to touch, so it's fine. And I just need to find more people like me. But for me, I try to back into it. And like I said, think about what is it that I need to accomplish here with this team? And then how do I bucket that out? And how do I like place that against the amount of people who can accomplish something like that? And like, who are the people who would be best to like leverage their skill set and their experiences together? So like functionally, that's how I think about it. But really for like any person I interview or any time that I'm deciding whether or not to bring someone onto a team of mine, at the center of my mind, it's always like, will this person's personality be an additive force to this team, right? Like, will they gel with our team, help us expand? Will they not, right? Like, do they approach things in a different way where like personalities will just collide? Because I think as a leader, my approach to leadership is I'm here for the team, not the team is here for me. So like I use my position to make sure that I'm able to give the resources and the environment that the team needs and deserves. And so like I take that very seriously, especially like as you're picking people who like people on the team are going to be working together hand in hand, like through the thick of it. And so making sure that those people can all connect and work together well, I take that as like my number one responsibility as the leader of a team.
Lauren, how do you connect people and make a team cohesive? What's your magic power?
I think one of the part of the beauty about being in my space of being in diversity and inclusion is we touch a lot of different areas of the firm. And one of the opportunities that I've had over the past few years have been overseeing our wealth management employee networking groups. And for anybody who's involved with, ERGs, ENGs, that the majority of the work usually is the work of the D&I team, right? One of the ways that I think we were able to build community, build a team, is there were so many employees across, I'll use wealth management as an example, who raised their hand wanting to get involved in this work, wanting to be a part of what we were creating in the D&I space. And so we thought, well, let's build this community of individuals who want to do more, who have this common goal. They may all have different skill sets. They may all bring something different to the table. They may have completely different ideas, but this is an area that they're passionate about. And so we created working committees, sort of advisory committees, if you will, for each of these networks. And it was such an amazing opportunity for us because we got to work with these incredible teams, but these teams got to know one another. So you wouldn't have met another group of, 10 to 15 individuals, if it weren't for this group. So I think it's even broader than thinking about your immediate team, right? How do you create teams outside of yours? And the one thing I just wanted to add to Mary Elizabeth's comment, which I loved, I think if anyone on this call who may be new to a team and you are trying to build out that network, when you meet someone for the first time, ask them to give you a list of 2 to 3 other people that they would recommend you meeting with. That's another way to build your team, right? Your community. And you'd be surprised the amount of people who will not say no. Right? More often than not, they will say, you know what, you should meet with this person and that person. And then that's an immediate introduction for you to say, listen, I spoke to Mary Elizabeth. She recommended I reach out to you. Mm-hmm. It's a great connection point, a great way to build your network within a new organization, but also you're building your team.
It's an amazing piece of advice. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm curious to, we've talked about a lot of the attributes we have that are helping us professionally, but I'd also just like to be a little honest here about our obstacles. Fiona, what would you say is your biggest obstacle professionally right now?
I still think that I shouldn't say I still believe that depending on the situation, when you walk in the room as a woman, you're underestimated. And people
does it make a difference being a Black woman, do you think, or is it just being a woman?
Oh, I think as a person of color, yeah, you're underestimated, for sure. Yeah, and I think that I've lost count of how many rooms I've walked into, and I'm the only woman and the only woman of color, or person of color, frankly. So that doesn't even like register to me anymore. And I remember once having a conversation with an assistant who looked at, we were talking about a meeting I was going to, and she looked at the roster and she goes, "You're the only woman and you're the only person of color in this meeting." Like I said to her, like, what would be new about that?
Welcome to my world, right? Like that's.
And I think too that the conversation that I had with her was that shouldn't even register while I'm doing my job. Like, to me, it becomes a barrier that you sort of put upon yourself, because instead of focusing on the substantive discussion, you're suddenly in the room thinking, I can't believe I'm the only woman again. I can't believe I'm the only person of color again. And so to me, it's like you walk in, you take note. If it's within your organization, then you know that you may have the ability and a voice to help rectify that situation. And if it's not, then you may have other ways where you can work to rectify that situation. But it shouldn't be something that's constantly playing in your head, because I think it impedes you. Yeah. I'm not sure I really answered the question.
But I'm curious, what's your advice to somebody who finds themselves in that situation? Because it is, I'm sure at some point you got used to it, but before you got used to it, you're super cognizant of it.
I don't think I really let it register with me that much, actually. And it could have been because of where I went to college, or it's probably college, because it certainly wasn't high school, that it just wasn't something that registered with me. Now, I would say I'm not a timid person, so and I'm not I'm not timid, and I don't suffer from like thinking that I can't do anything. So I'm confident. I've been called overconfident sometimes. Like,
okay,
so
you can't be too overconfident.
Yeah, so that's not really something that it's just not really something that bothers me, and I know that doesn't work for everyone. But you do learn. I will say this: you learn little tricks, right? And so if you're going to, for me, I wear glasses, and they're distance glasses. So if I'm going to speak in an audience that is large, I will take off my glasses, because then I can't focus on any particular face or person. Like, everyone's just a blur.
I love that.
And so you learn to you use your own tricks to get past the humps that will make you nervous about any particular thing.
Mary Elizabeth, what's your obstacle, would you say, professionally right now?
I think I can be overly critical of myself. I'm sure a lot of us struggle with that. Like and I say that because I find myself asking myself that a lot, right? Like, what are the obstacles in front of me and how can I like surmount them? But I think for me, I want to learn about the business more. Like, I want to continue, and I'm doing it, right? Like, it doesn't feel like it's some far away thing, but it does feel like an area where I want to dive deeper in. And it's because my career has been in the public sector, right? So working in an organization that, the business is what's driving the organization, that's wholly different for me. And so, I'm also the kind of person who likes to go 20 levels deep. I'm like overly prepared a lot of the time. But it's my safety blanket, honestly. Like when I think about, meetings that I've had to present to very senior people at various times in my career, I have prepared to know questions that go 12 degrees deeper, kind of a thing. So like, I know that any offshoot in that meeting will not be a surprise for me. And like, that's how I feel safe and like confident and comfortable. And so I think that's why I'm hyper aware of the business side, right? Like, cause I want to be able to feel like I can go 12 to 20 levels deeper, but I'm just not there yet. So I'm working on it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Lauren Z, for you, how do you become indispensable to your organization? What do you think you bring to the table that makes you a very valuable player?
Me personally, or how do you?
Both.
Ah,
I want to hear what it is that you bring, and then also
it's
your
such a
advice
good
for doing it.
question. It's such a good question. I think empathy is critical. And I've thought about that question a lot, just in terms of what your superpower is. And, if you've ever heard that you're a great people person, sometimes, at least for me, and I agree, Mary Elizabeth, I am my own worst critic. I own it. She's terrible, that voice. But I've never accepted that as a true superpower. Like, you are really good at connecting the dots or speaking to people or being empathetic or creating that safe space to have comfortable, uncomfortable conversations. But I really do think that that's it. When you're in front of someone or you're watching a speaker, there was a study that was done where 90% of people were focusing on how that person connected, what that person was wearing, what the person looked like, versus what they were saying, right? Maya Angelou's quote.
Yeah.
It's how you make people feel. And so I think that's something that might be underrated, but that's one way that I think that I've been able to differentiate myself.
That's great. Anybody else want to chime in there? What your obstacle is, if you haven't shared it already?
So I shared a little bit earlier that networking was my obstacle. So
I thought you were going to say it was your curly hair.
It was a little bit of both. No, it's my power now. It's easy to get ready in the morning. That's a power right there. Wash and go. Oh, no, the networking is key. And that's why I'm going to be reaching out to my savvy panelists here to talk more and to learn more from them. I came in during the pandemic, and it was this, and I by nature was very camera shy most of my life. So the ability to do this and create relationships was very difficult, and people knew each other already. They had relationships already. So it was so hard to network and do anything. And it was only when I started meeting people in person that I was able to create a deeper connection with people. And so I would say networking was probably my whole life, my hardest piece. And then coming to a new environment during a pandemic and trying to do that was even harder. So it's only now that I'm starting to emerge from that. So yeah, I would definitely say networking.
Great. I'm curious for all of my panelists, what is it that you think works in terms of becoming an ally for women, and not just women, but women of color and also women of a certain age? I'll put myself in that category because and younger women too. I mean, there's just, there's different connection points for women at work. And how do we as leaders set them up to succeed? It's a very big question, and it could be a whole other panel, but go ahead, Limor.
I'll tackle this one because it's near and dear to my heart. And it's really what I talked about earlier. We have to change the recipe. We're in an environment where the recipe is written for us already. So as women, and as we emerge and grow, we have to help change that recipe and bring other women along with us. That's the key. It's starting younger too, because part of my work, I volunteer my time also on the DEI Council as well at our organization, and we're talking about opportunities to bring people into the financial world and create this financial acumen. So we started reading this book. It's called How Money Works, and I'll put the link here in the chat. But it really talks about how money works and stop being a sucker. And I read it and I realized I was a sucker because I knew nothing about how money worked. So we're saying, how do we start that at younger ages? So how do we bring financial acumen at a young age, especially in our diverse communities that are not exposed to it, and create these opportunities to see financial world as a vehicle for them? We talk about women too, right? I have zero financial acumen. I'm only learning now because I have to take my licenses for my job, and I'm learning about it. But the first time I sat in the course, I was petrified because it was like a foreign language. I didn't even understand what they were talking about. So I'll say that it's really, how do we reach out even at younger ages? You know, there's organizations like this, Savvy Ladies, getting involved and volunteering our time in these platforms and helping other women. There's another organization I'm working with now. It's called Rocks. It's trying to reach younger women at a younger age and setting them up for empowerment. It's called Ruling Our Experiences. I'll put those 2 links in the chat for people to look at. But I think that's what we could do, is how do we start giving back and bringing other women along with us and really starting to impact and change that recipe?
Mary Elizabeth, what's your foundation? What are the building blocks that you see as crucial to letting women succeed?
I mean, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. I think it's really about reaching out and bringing people along with you. And I say that because, you know, I'm still like early mid career, right? And like when I think about folks who are earlier in their career or later in their career than I am, in both ways, I'm trying to find ways to like reach out and help bring people along. Certainly like those who are earlier in their career, and then the people like my mentors and like my mentors network and like the degrees off of that, people who reach out and help bring me along and like think of different people for me to meet, network with, like not even, you know, think of like different jobs or positions or anything like that, but just like including me in places that I like wouldn't be is, I mean, it's incredible. It's incredibly pivotal. And so if I am so lucky to have other women do that for me, I know that I need to do that for other women as well. And so I just couldn't agree more.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Can I just add on to that? I think there's also this misconception. We hear a lot about mentorship and sponsorship, but I think oftentimes there's this misconception that you have to be a senior leader or in a C-suite position to be a mentor or a sponsor. You know, irrespective of the role you're in today. And I couldn't agree with you more, Limor. We have to support each other. And it could be something as simple as you're in a meeting. Do you have an opportunity to mention someone's name? You know, I had an opportunity to work with Lauren Young, and she was incredible. She helped me with XYZ. And it's that you're planting that seed. Yeah. Right. And so I would just encourage
you for that, by the way. Thank you for the shout.
That you don't have to get to a certain point to start that process, right? Sending the elevator back down. Think about those individuals who you've worked with, who have helped you, and just give them a shout out every now and then. It could be that simple. That's a sponsor.
That's great. One thing I will say in my role as a personal finance person, I've always been the person that people come to when they have to figure out what they should do with their retirement plan or, you know, roll over a 401k. And I mean, obviously that's a skill set that I have that Stacey has writ large, but being able to provide that kind of support, that's my little superpower, as I can help people in a way. And the one thing I will say to the women on this call who are earlier in their career, no matter what you are, but if you're early in your career, just start saving. If you start saving now, the power of compounding is amazing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the money that I put in my retirement plan when I was just starting out at 25, like it's serious money now. And then I didn't do anything except, you know, invest it. So that's my little superpower. Fiona, I do want to get to you a little bit too, to talk about those building blocks to help women succeed. And I would love if you don't mind talking particularly about women of color And also women who may be further along in their careers, more mature, because age discrimination is a thing. It's not, it's not ethereal, it's real. And I think you might be on mute.
Why, yes, I
Yes,
am.
yes, you are. Hello, mute.
So the building blocks. So I guess I'm never shy about giving anyone advice. And so with the lawyers that I work with, and the younger lawyers, and I freely give advice. I guess sort of like Limor was saying, I freely give advice if I feel like the person is receptive, because they can also take you as like a nag, depending on the situation. But for people of color, I usually tell them, like, you need to figure out who the most powerful sponsor or ally is that you could possibly have, and figure out how to get to that person. If it's the chair of the firm who, so I'll just give an anecdote. So I was at a law firm before I came to KPMG, and every Thursday, I think it was, this law firm had lunch for all the lawyers. And it was on the concourse level, it was open seating. And so you could sit with anyone that you wanted to. And so I would tell the diverse lawyers, like, stop sitting with your friends like you already know them. This is your opportunity to go sit with the chair of the firm. And all of them would say, I can't do that. And I was like, why not? I don't understand. Like, if he's there, there's an open seat, go sit next to him. Because he would go sit, sometimes he would look for people to sit with. Sometimes if he just saw an open table, he would just go sit at an open table and then expect people to fill it in. So I was like, why can't you be one of those people to fill it in? And it was always, what would I talk to him about? Like, the man loves college football. Like, start there if you know something about college football. I know nothing about college football, but at least I knew his team, and I could say, if it was the season, I could say, how's your team doing this season? And frankly, everyone knew his pedigree and, you know, his legal career, and I was like, there must be something in his background, frankly, that you can, he's 60, like there must be something in his background that you can find that you can talk to him about. And so again, back to where I started, to me, it's always about building relationships and looking beyond people that look like you, because you assume that someone who doesn't look like you wouldn't take an interest, and that's not necessarily the case. And so when I think about the mentors that I've had, the sponsors that I've had, the allies that I've had, they all don't look like me. And so, and they're not all in the legal profession. And so I think it's really important for people to sort of step out of their boundaries and think about who will be a good ally, who would be a good sponsor for me. And it actually does take some strategic thinking. Like, it's not all about like doing it on the fly, but doing it on the fly could be great too, because you can run into the chair of the firm while you're getting coffee, or the woman that you really admire because she gave a great speech during a meeting. You can run into her on the way to the ladies' room and strike up a conversation. And so to me, it's, again, building those relationships. It all starts with relationships.
Lauren Z, what needs to change to get more women like the awesome women assembled here today in positions of power? What do you think you could rebuild? I don't want to say just the corporate world, but if you could rebuild the workplace, how would you do it?
It would definitely go back to this, women supporting women and not relying on someone else to create that opportunity, right? You know, those roadblocks, we need to push through those roadblocks and find those individuals, Fiona, to your point, who you either want in your corner, either want as part of your board of directors, and get people on board with you, your mission, your vision around whatever it is that you may be passionate about. I also go back to this virtual world. I think that it has really created somewhat of a level playing field in terms of exposure. You know, if we're attending this event, we're all in different cities, but we all have this up. We're not at different parts of the boardroom. Now, granted, there are people who are back in the office, right? But I think there's something to be said around the pandemic creating this space where we've had to bring more of our lives to the table. And so I think that's also created some sort of balance in terms of maybe before you didn't realize that Limor had 4 kids, right? And was going home to juggle, you know, home life. Now, I think as part of this virtual world, we're starting to see other aspects of each other's lives. And I think that's changing the conversation quite a bit because we are learning the other layers of women and what they have to their challenges. Let me say that, their challenges throughout any given day.
I love that. And you know, it's funny. I've known Stacy. I've known you forever. In this call, I see your one dog there. I saw the other dog. I'm assuming that was your daughter and your husband also, all in the span of the past hour.
There you go.
And I love that because it changes my perception of you. It really does. Because I don't think of you in that context. I think of you as Stacy, my source.
No, Samantha needed some lined paper. My husband said it's Cinco de Mayo. We should have Mexican, and then the dogs have been barking. So I haven't resorted to a glass of wine, but I've been fantasizing about it. To be 100% honest with you all.
One more minute.
One more minute. I know. Well, we literally are at our last minute, but I do want to leave everybody with like one little quick tip, something that you haven't shared, something that's going to make the people who are listening successful, or just give them some food for thought. So I'll start. I'm going to go across the screen. Limor, what's your quick tip? And be fast.
Be real, be you, and stick to it. Don't let anybody turn you away from what you believe you want to do and who you want.
Mary Elizabeth.
For sure, be you, but also work hard, like demonstrate your greatness and like in all of the ways that we talked about today.
Lauren Z.
Don't dim your light. Give yourself grace. Don't try to be perfect in all areas of your life. Own it. Own it.
Fiona.
So be confident in yourself and your abilities. No one knows everything. So everyone is, trying to figure it out as we go. So you can do it too.
And mine would be to have fun. And this was so much fun. You are all incredible and amazing.